and it shows a little map. It says, basically, burns down. They show the map. Oh, guys, where I work. Oh my God. Wow. There's something. Okay. 12 piece. 24 12. Okay, he's got your discount card. Oh, that's good. All around town. I reckon you can do it everywhere you go. Everywhere you're looking at the wall. It's also good there.
Welcome to the Good Enough Mine Tour, you guys. My name's Kerry. I'll be your guide today. Any questions that you may have as we progress, don't hesitate to ask. Make sure your cameras are ready. You'll want to take plenty of pictures once we're down there, so let's go mining. I'd just like to demonstrate how the miners drilled the holes for the dynamite back in the 1880s. Okay, this is the tool of the trade of the 19th century hard rock miner. It's an actual drill steel that came out of one of the mines here, and it's probably well over 100 years old. And everything you're going to see here today began with one of these. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate using this antique because I don't want to wreck it. Instead, I've got a set of modern drill steels, and these are used in hard rock drilling contests. Just like cowboys have rodeos to show their skills off, miners have drilling contests and other events. We have a contest here at the mine every April, and or we normally do, not this year. We're going to do it on Labor Day. But they have them down in Bisbee on the 4th of July and in several other locations as well. And the way it works is you're given 10 minutes to drill a hole in a rock with a 4-pound hammer and a set of these. And I've been in 5 of these contests so far, and my best showing was going on 6 years ago in Bisbee. I drilled a 7-inch hole, came in 4th place, and won $300. Wow. Not bad for 10 minutes work, right?
Yeah, really.
Now, the winner that day drilled an 11-inch hole and won $900. You can make some pretty good money doing this. Okay, here's the way it goes. Now, normally I'd be running water as I drill. That flushes the cuttings out of the hole, makes the drill steel less likely to stick, but I just barely started this hole. I don't need water yet. But this is the exact same way they drilled back in the 1880s. You hit it and you turn it. After drilling like this for 10 minutes straight, I can barely hang on to my hammer. But this is the way the original miners would spend hours at a time underground, drilling exactly like this. It's just like work, I'm here to tell you. Now, that's called single jacking. That's one miner working alone. Double jacking was 2 miners working together. You'd have one guy with an 8-pound sledgehammer wailing away for all he's worth, while his partner would be twisting the drill steel for him. How do you like that?
Well, that's trust.
Takes a lot of trust and confidence in your buddy's abilities, to say the least. But these guys were pretty good at what they did. They'd switch back and forth and take turns, weren't quite as many broken hands as you'd think. Single jacking, you can drill about 3 feet deep. Double jacking, 4.5 to 5 feet deep. But obviously it takes a lot of time and effort. Modern drills are powered by compressed air. They'll run a 6-foot hole in no time at all. But this is the way they had to do it back in the day. So dynamite, of course, goes in the holes, and they blow the rock apart. Then they come back with an ore cart like that one. That holds about a ton of rocks, and they'd have to fill it manually. Then they push it along the rails underground to the shaft where they ran it into the cage, which was the elevator, and that's a cage right there. And a steam-powered hoist like that pink thing hauled the cage to the surface at the end of a cable, and that's how they got rocks out of the mine. And that steam-powered hoist was the only machinery they had at their disposal. Everything else underground was done manually, with primitive tools, back-breaking work in cases of dynamite. And it's just amazing to see what they were able to accomplish given the very limited resources available to them at the time. So let's go down and see how they did. Tombstone mining district extends outwards for several miles into these hills. There were 3,000 claims filed here during the initial boom of the 1880s, and 25 producing mines like this one. As a result, these hills are honeycombed with about 300 miles of underground workings. It's like a city down there, complete labyrinth. It goes all the way from the surface, clear on down to the water table at 500 feet, and actually deeper than that. In 1885, the Contention and Grand Central mining companies installed gigantic pumps called Cornish engines on their properties. Using those pumps, they lowered the water table 200 feet, so they were mining at the 700-foot level back then. But by 1891, both pumps had been destroyed in two separate fires. So the water table just rose back up to its natural level at 500 feet, and that's more or less where it is now. And all the mine workings from there on up are for the most part intact and dry. So they'll tell you in town that the mine's flooded, but don't believe it. It's only the very lowest workings which contain any water. As you'll see, this mine is bone dry. Otherwise, we'd be giving you, I don't know, life preservers along with the hard hats, right? You know the orange one?
Yeah.
So this is the good enough mine. The claim was filed here in 1878. Work began in 1879, and by the end of that year, this mine was producing somewhere in the neighborhood of $25,000 a month in high-grade silver ore. And it remained a big producing mine until it played out sometime in the mid-1890s. The mine was owned by Ed Scheffelin. He's the founder of the town. They told him at Fort Huachuca in 1877, while he was there buying supplies, the cavalry there told him all he'd ever find here would be his own tombstone. They thought he was nuts because he was prospecting alone deep in the middle of Apache country. Well, Ed listened to what they had to say. Then he went right back out and made the richest silver discovery in the Southwest. Named his first claim the Tombstone because of what they told him. And that's where the mining district and then the town in turn got their names, from that original claim. Ed went into business with his brother Al and a mining engineer named Richard Gerd. They started the Tombstone Mill and Mining Company. They had the Good Enough mine here, they had the Lucky Cuss, the Tough Nut, the East Side, West Side Defense, and a few other mines. They had stamp mills on the San Pedro River at Charleston to process the ore, and a company sawmill up in the Huachuca Mountains. Turned out to be a very successful business, and the three of them sold their shares in that company in 1880, and each of the three made $500,000. And that's $1880. It works out to 11.3 million bucks a piece in today's money. Yeah, those are bats. So these guys made a fortune here in a relatively short time, and this mine played a major part in all that. Actually, we do have bats here, but you hardly ever see them. Now, 9 years ago, when we started restoring the mine, this area right here looked a lot different than it does now. Over the years, those 3 holes had been bulldozed full. Only the main entrance was clear, and we had to enlarge it. So this area once contained about this much rock, dirt, busted concrete, all kinds of debris, sloping upwards to and filling those holes. So all you saw was a big pile of rocks and dirt. Well, we came in with a Wagner underground front end loader, a load haul dump, and we cleaned all this out, took everything out of the holes and off that ledge. Now you can get an idea as to what the mine looked like originally. And we figured that that's the discovery hole up there, where the initial surface outcropping of silver ore was where they started. And where we're standing was once a solid deposit of silver ore, big one. Starting up there, they drilled and blasted it all out, leaving this stope, big open chamber that once contained the ore. Takes pretty much the size and shape of the ore body that used to be here. So you can see the direction in which the ore body ran, and you can tell the angle at which it dipped down into the ground. And it just keeps on going way further than you can see. Now this mine is enormous. It goes on for what seems like forever, and we have yet to explore the whole thing. So all you're going to see here today is a very small part of the entire mine. And you'll notice when we're down there, there are holes and tunnels leading up in all directions. So a few things to bear in mind while you're here today. About 3/4 of the way down the stairs, you'll see a patch of red paint. You'll see that here and there throughout the mine today. That's where the rock dips lower than usual, reminds you to duck your head. The rock walls down there are just dry laid rock walls, no mortar involved, so be careful not to loosen or dislodge any of the rocks. We ask that you don't touch the wooden timbers. They're in great shape. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just that there are one or two holding massive boulders in place overhead, so leave the timbers alone. And finally, please don't steal the pretty rocks. Having said that, let's head downstairs. Now that shaft over there had been filled in as well, and we pulled out all the rock we could from up on the surface, as deep as we could reach with an excavator. The rest we pulled out from down here, and as we worked, that hole began to open. And it became obvious that that shaft goes down at least as deep as where we're going, possibly even deeper. Red paint, watch your heads. And down here at the bottom of the stairs is the driver's side front fender to a Ford Model T and a rear washer handle. No idea what they're doing down here, but there they are. Okay, there used to be a bridge that ran up into this tunnel here, and that's where they ran the old mine tours down here years and years ago. And we took that bridge down because it was just plain ramshackle. It was about to fall down anyway, so we got rid of it. Hidden beneath the rocks under the bridge, we found all these neat minerals. Down here in the hole is calcite, the blue is chrysocolla, and the white stuff here is calcium carbonate cave popcorn, like you'd see if you went to Kartchner Caverns. Now this was all part of a VUG. VUG, which is a natural cavity in the solid rock, like a bubble or a void within the rock. And just like within a geode, you get all these neat minerals forming inside the VUG. So the miners broke through it while working past, and it extends over into here and over behind me as well. And back there is where the shaft comes down. And as you can see, at this level, it's still full of rocks. We never cleaned it out this deep. And I suspect that that shaft goes down a lot deeper than this, a few more levels anyway. But because it's filled in, we've got no way of knowing. Now at one point, there were rails that ran back here, and this is where they'd run the ore cart into the cage, the elevator to be hauled up to the surface. And those rails could still be buried beneath all that muck there, we don't know. And just to orient you, that's the same shaft I pointed out up there when I was drilling. So the drilling rock is pretty much right over us. This drift over here, after a 70-foot crawl on your hands and knees, and if you look all the way back there, you can see what I'm referring to. You crawl through that hole back there, and 70 feet later, you wind up in a completely different system of tunnels, which extends under that wash outside to beneath that hill across the wash. At one point, it crosses the claim boundary and becomes part of the Tough Nut mine. So if you crawl through that hole back there, you wind up in a completely different mine. Now, several years ago, we were using the backhoe that we had at the time over on the other side of the wash, and we uncovered a filled-in mine opening which had been forgotten. We jumped in, started exploring, and at one point crawled right back through here. Yeah, so if you crawl through that hole, you can get out the new entrance on the other side of the wash. But we're not going to do any crawling today.
Good.
You'll have to wait till this weekend. Yeah, it's been one of our ongoing projects back there for quite a while now, and we run tours through there on weekends. That is the Tough Nut Mine Adventure Tour. And believe me, it lives up to the name. After you get through the crawl, actually I take people in the wash entrance, you don't have to crawl that way. Either way, once you're back there, it's a half-mile hike underground, takes 3 hours to get through, and there are some amazing things back there. There are stopes back there that are enormous, huge cavernous open areas that dwarf anything you're seeing here today. The minerals back there are nothing short of spectacular. For instance, there are vugs out there, natural cavities like that. There are vugs back there that are big enough for a person to climb up into, and they're lined with crystals. There's a lot of that type of thing back there, just some amazing geology. And you're marching down long tunnels, climbing up and down ladders, going through undeveloped areas that we're going to leave as found. There are all kinds of neat little crawly little side detours that we take off the main path, and that's where you see the really neat rocks. And there are artifacts just strewn throughout the place. We're always finding, new artifacts going all the way back to the 1880s. So it's a taste of real mine exploring, real spelunking, mainly in the dark. You need a good flashlight. Work gloves and knee pads are nice to have too. So it's something truly unique and people love it. Now there's a breeze blowing through here. I'm going to illustrate with a pinch of dust. It's, what does it do? It's coming this way slowly. That's the ventilation system. It's still in place and it works great. All they did was interconnect these mines, and that set up this natural air current which blows pretty much constantly one direction or the other. Keeps the air down here nice and fresh, and it's always this comfortable temperature. And that drift back there, that's just a dead end. That goes back maybe 100 feet and stops. They were probably following a vein through there which quit on them, so they abandoned that. They just walked away. Excuse me. And you see the black stuff on the rock right there? That's what it's all about. That's silver. The black and the brown, that's exactly what they were after. That's silver chloride and manganese oxide combined. There's also lead, tin, zinc, and a little bit of gold in there. So we're looking at a vein, and you can see just how they're following it going in this direction. There it goes. Now back there, the vein pinched out and quit, resulting in that dead end. This vein did the opposite. It opened up into a massive deposit, a huge ore body, which was mined out 130 odd years ago, leaving a series of stopes, big open chambers, and that's what we're walking through today. So think about it, wherever you see open space down here was once that brown and black stuff. So you can just imagine how much they got from here. It was a major discovery. And everything else down here is waste rock. If it's not ore, then it's waste. So it's a byproduct and a nuisance, and something had to be done with it. Some of it they hauled to the surface where they threw it on the dump, but they got away with leaving plenty of it in place down here. Here they took waste rock and they put it to good use and built cribbing with it. This was built by the original miners. Been in place probably since 1880. They stacked all these rocks up neatly, got them out of the way, but it also helps to support the back or the ceiling. But this mine doesn't need much shoring. It's bored through solid limestone, and this is very strong and stable rock. Plus they left plenty of these big supporting columns in place. So this mine has plenty of structural integrity. It survived a major earthquake in 1887 completely intact. Shows you how strong it was built. These guys knew exactly what they were doing. Real pretty calcite in there. And we call this stope the Valley, and there's some real interesting colors in the rock in here. Now this limestone, of course, is all ancient seabed, hundreds of millions of years old. Becomes apparent that it is seabed when you see how it was put down in strata like that. And here's a real pretty vein of chrysocolla. It's copper silicate, and the copper in the mineral, of course, is what gives it this color. And no, it's not turquoise. Turquoise is hard enough to where it can be cut and polished, and we've all seen it made into jewelry. This is kind of soft and crumbly, can't do much of anything with it. Now bind it together with some kind of resin, and you can pass it off as being fake turquoise. The way to tell the difference between the two is touch the item to your tongue. If it sticks very slightly, busted, it's chrysocolla. If it doesn't stick at all, it's real turquoise and you're good. See, now you know. This has been a public service announcement.
Thank you.
And that's the utility room where we put the breaker box. And we call this stope the rotunda. It's the biggest one you'll be seeing here today, but by no means is it the biggest one around. For instance, when we take people through the Tough Nut tour, we take them through a stope over there, which runs on for 700 continuous feet, and it's twice the size of this in places. But you got to admit, this is pretty impressive. So it took us over a year to get the mine ready to open, and I've been here since day one, and take it from me, the place was a mess when we started. This is nothing but a nasty, dirty old abandoned mine, and you can barely even walk in here, so we had our work cut out. We started out with compressed air, and we blew the dust and the dirt off everything, washed everything down with plenty of water, and that really brought out the colors. The path itself took a lot of work. Some places, like right through there, we had to cut through solid rock. Then we smoothed it over with concrete, which came down here in 80-pound bags on our shoulders, I'll have you know. That was a riot. Other places, we had to dig through massive piles of rock, and we built, I don't know how many feet of our own walls. And as we worked, we ran across all these artifacts. This is just a sampling of what we found while working down here. Some items we found, don't even know what they're for, like this bracket. Couldn't tell you what it was holding together, but what's neat about it is it's obviously hand forged. It most likely came from the mine's blacksmith shop. Each mine had one. That's where they mainly sharpened drill steels, but they'd also fabricate items like this. Found cans, plenty of them. They had to eat lunch, right? So here's somebody's lunch from around 1880. Some miner ate a can of beans, peaches, couldn't tell you exactly what. Then threw the can away, and that's where it stayed till we found it. Historic garbage, right? But look at how they put their cans together back then. Soldered together with lead. Yeah, both outside and in. See, there's a big old bead of lead in here.
Yeah.
And it was lined with tin to make it less poisonous. Less poisonous, right?
Yeah.
But if the manufacturer got cheap and skimped on the amount of tin they were supposed to line these with, somebody was bound to get lead poisoning. Apparently that wasn't too uncommon back then. And we found tools. Here's a broken drill steel. It snapped while they're using it, they just threw it away. Other tools we found were in much better shape, like this moil. See, there's nothing wrong with it, and I'm convinced that it was misplaced, not discarded. Now this has a different tip than a drill steel, and it was used to prepare the working face before they started drilling. They would take this and a hammer and scale away any loose or fractured rock until they had a solid rock face to drill into. And it shouldn't be too surprising that we found plenty of dynamite fuse. Dynamite fuse from the 1880s. All it is twine with a core of black powder coated with tar and wrapped with cloth tape to make it moisture resistant. Burned at 45 seconds to the foot. This sets off the blasting cap, and that sets off the charge. Part of a dynamite crate. You can see the remnants of square nails, which tells you it's from the 19th century. And this is one of the few pieces that you run across with lettering on it. It says Hercules powder. That was one of several dynamite manufacturers based in San Francisco during the 19th century. And you see the white stuff on there? That's candle wax. Yeah, candle wax. That's the only source of light they had while working down here were candles. These guys are pulling 10-hour shifts by candlelight. Kind of adds another dimension to what you're seeing here. Not only was all this accomplished through sheer physical backbreaking labor, but in the dark with a candle burning. That's about the same amount of light they had to work by. Everything you're seeing here today was accomplished with only this much light. I mean, that's just amazing when you think about it. Back-breaking hard work in the dark. But that situation got a lot better in 1900. That's when the carbide lamp was patented. These replaced candles underground, and it's a major improvement. You put water up there, calcium carbide down there. Looks like little black rocks. Water dripping onto the carbide starts a chemical reaction which produces acetylene gas, just like you'd use on a cutting torch. The acetylene comes out that jet in the center, you light it with that striker, and you've got a brilliant white flame, shoots out about 1.5 inches, and you can see. You can see real well using these. So these are in common use until the 1930s, when battery-operated lights began to replace them. And the main problem with this is it's still using an open flame. So if you're using one of these in a coal mine and there's enough methane gas present, you're running the risk of blowing the whole place up.
Boom.
But you don't have to worry about that here. This is a hard rock mine, not a coal mine. There's never any danger of explosive gases being present in a mine like this. So they didn't have to worry about that. And that's a carbide can. That's what the stuff came in. Somebody put a handle on this one, converting it into a bucket. So if you worked up there, you take your lunch, your tools, everything else you needed for your shift, load it into the bucket and haul it up there at the end of a rope. That would be a lot easier than dragging everything behind you as you crawled and slithered your way through the series of cramped holes to get up there. And that's almost another level. That goes on for a couple hundred feet. They just followed the ore body wherever it took them. Every lead, every vein. That's why you see all the holes. It's where they're following something. Goes off in all directions, like I said. Watch your heads in here, it gets low. Neat little bug full of sparkly calcite. And we call this stope the chapel. We're about 100 feet underground right now, and about midway between the bar patio up there and the billboard that stands on our vacant lot. And these are all original timbers. These have been in place since 1880 or 1881, and they're still in fine shape. They're just as sound as the day they're put in. They're just hand-cut logs from the Huachuca Mountains, and the lack of moisture, of course, has preserved these over the years. And the fact that the miners that did this knew exactly what they were doing helps too. Their work has outlived them by a long time. Yeah, these guys were a skilled group of workers, and they were paid pretty well. These guys are making $4 a day, and that was good money back then. Cowboys only made $20 a month. A private in the Army only made $15. Monthly rent on a good-sized cabin was $15. An excellent meal at a good restaurant was 50 cents. A beer was a nickel, and a shot was 1 bit, half a quarter. So $4 a day wasn't a bad living at all. They worked 6 10-hour shifts a week, usually had Sundays off, and the mines ran 24 hours a day. 2 10-hour shifts with 2 hours between for the dust to settle and the air to clear after they blasted. Now, since the mines ran 24 hours, so did the whole town. All the saloons, restaurants, gambling joints, what have you, were open continuously because there was always a shift that was off at any given time of the day or night. So you could think of Tombstone as being the Las Vegas of its day. It was a wide open town that never shut down, and you could get anything you wanted here any time of the day or night, whether your mother would approve of it or not. Okay, now it's time to look at pretty rocks. Come check this out. Yeah, we've got calcite crystals, calcite boxwork. The sparkly stuff is tiny little calcite crystals, and it continues all the way down this drift. Real pretty stuff. And once again, it was part of a VUG, V-U-G, a natural cavity in the rock. You can see where part of it still exists there. That hole there is natural. So this is real pretty, but back there is something pretty scary. That's a winze. That goes straight down 30 feet. It's also a raise. It goes up at least 25 feet, so that's over 55 feet of underground shaft back there. And there's another way down to the same place. Back there in the chapel, beyond that railing, is another winze, but instead of being vertical like this one, that one over there is on an incline about a 45. So you can get down there, and I've been down there several times. Turns out there's a transport tunnel down there with the track's still in place, and that's pretty rare. Going in this direction, it dead ends almost immediately. Going the other way, runs along for about 100 feet, then it looks like they backfilled it from the other side. And I'm convinced that it keeps on going towards one of the shafts. This mine has several, and the ore from this general area most likely got dumped down that winze. Then you'd have a crew down there filling up ore carts, running them to the shaft. And that's the way hard rock mines are usually laid out. You'll have a system of stopes like where we're standing, with a whole network of transport tunnels running beneath them to the various shafts. Pardon me? It used to be we could only come this far, then we'd have to go right back the way we just came. So while restoring the mine, we dug this pathway through the rock so we could continue in a circle. And of course, we found more neat rocks digging through here like this stuff. We call it mine snow, but it turns out that all it is plain old gypsum. Same thing you make drywall out of. But it's still a neat rock. See, it's translucent. And if you hit it with your finger just right, you can make it ring. Pretty cool. This calcite outcropping had been buried for years. Nobody knew it was here until we found it while digging past. And I've got a pretty good idea as to how long it was buried, because right next to it, right in there, we found a San Francisco Chronicle front page, dates to January 1890. It's still in excellent shape. We've got it stored away safely. And working at the Tough Nut mine a few years ago, I found a complete newspaper. It's all there. The El Paso Herald, Christmas Day 1918. Talks about the end of World War I. And it's still over there. It's part of that tour. Watch your stuff on the bridge. It gets a little steep towards the end. You might want to use this rock as a railing and be careful.
Go ahead. Thank you.
And watch out for the headache rock. It'll get you. And there are more right past it. Beware. The scientific term for this type of mineral here is leverite, as in, leave it right there, it's worthless. Leverite. But this is not leverite. It's a pile of silver ore, and I'm the first to admit it's not very impressive looking. Just a bunch of ugly black rocks. And you think that containing silver would be a lot prettier. You'd think it'd be sparkly or shiny, or at least have some kind of character to it anyway, but nope, that's how it comes. That's the raw material. Now here is the finished product. That is an 1880 Morgan silver dollar from the New Orleans Mint, and that makes it Tombstone silver. The silver that was produced here was mainly purchased by the federal government, sent to the mint in New Orleans to make these, so that's exactly how it turns out right there. Now to get from ugly black rock to pretty silver coin was a real process. They started by loading this into 20-foot long ore wagons up on the surface. They were hauled 3 at a time by 20 mule teams down to the mills along the San Pedro River. They had to put the mills there on the river because they needed water to operate, and there's none to be found here. In this case, it goes to Charleston, 8 miles away, halfway to Sierra Vista. And you can still see the mill foundations from Charleston Road. In fact, there's a real nice hiking trail with signs and everything takes you right to them. Once there, it got sent through a jaw crusher, ends up about the size of that gravel, then completely pulverized in a stamp mill, and at that point they added water. Now it's the consistency of wet concrete. That was placed in an amalgamating pan, big round tank with a set of cast iron paddles that stirred everything up. They added mercury, copper sulfate, and salt, and heated the whole poisonous mess with steam. After about 6 hours, the silver in the ore would have combined with the mercury to form amalgam, which is what the dentist uses to make fillings, or used to. So you got lumps of that. Everything else got rinsed away as mill tailings. They'd roast the amalgam in a furnace, actually in a retort, a closed vessel, and the mercury vaporized. They capture the mercury vapor, cool it down, condense it back into liquid form, and reuse it. And that leaves you with pure silver, plus a modest amount of gold. They'd melt that, pour it into a mold to form the ingot. Now the ingots were huge. They weighed 180 pounds. You can see the molds up at the courthouse. Well, they made them that big to make them harder to steal. Good luck running off with a 180-pound bar of silver, right? Makes perfect sense. So the government bought the ingots and made these, and the miners made their $4 a day and spent their money in town, and the mining companies bought equipment and supplies from local merchants, paid for services like freight, and the economy here boomed and the town grew. So Tombstone was a mining town. That was the primary industry of the 1880s. And all the gunfights and other mayhem that occurred up there were just extracurricular activities, boys being boys. Yeah, this town was all about the mining. And we're standing in the real business district from back then. And there you have it. That's the story of mining in Tombstone. Pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
How did they ever figure out that a black rock like that was worth anything, you know?
Well, Ed Scheffelin had spent a lot of time both prospecting and working in mines in Nevada and the surrounding states. There's a lot of silver country up there, so he recognized it right off the bat. Well, we came in on that side of the rotunda. I remember us standing right there. Mm-hmm. That's the hole you crawl into, which gets you up into there and up into there. Yeah. Went through all those workings back there, and now we're leaving on this side. Let's head back towards the daylight.
That's right, that was the largest room we're gonna see in this one, right there, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, that stuff is puny compared to some of the other stuff that are around. That's where we went in and just completed the loop.
Oh. It looks different when you go back through it the opposite direction.
Yeah, looks different coming out when you go going in. Okay, 60 steps back up. Just take them at your own pace. If you need to stop and rest on the way up, by all means do so. Just take your time. Hey, thanks for taking the mine tour, you guys.
Thank you.
I'm just bringing my. I'm just not bringing up the tree top today. I just reached the top of the stairs. Right over here. Well, thanks again, guys. Go and catch your breath. Don't get in a hurry.
That was neat.
Pretty cool stuff, huh?
What's your name again?
Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Darren.
What's the temperature you stay down there?
A couple summers ago, I got a cheap thermometer from the general store, and I stuck it back there in the chapel. Went to 64 and stayed there.
No kidding. Wow.
You can feel the temperature fluctuate a little bit during the winter, but it can get pretty cold here in December and January. It gets a little chillier down there, but
Yeah.
generally during the winter, if it's so cold that I'm wearing a jacket, I'll take it off and hang it on that drill before I go down, because it's usually comfortable down there.
Wow.
Big selling point during the summer. You tell
Yeah,
people it's
no
65
doubt.
degrees down there when it's 105 up here.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah,
That's air conditioning.
natural air conditioning doesn't even cost a dime.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding, yeah. It'd be a tough life, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, not easy at all.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, yeah.
Have a good afternoon, guys.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Wow.
That's pretty cool.
You want to stand over there and I'll take your picture?
No, that's okay.